Today, our drink will be a honey lemon chamomile whiskey. It's sort of like a hot toddy, but different. Okay, I'm going to be covering all of the books that I have read since whenever the last time I did a book wrap-up is, which has been a while. It's been a long while. And if I was capable of feeling shame, I would. But I'm not. So yay. I'm lying. I do feel very embarrassed about how few books I've read since August, I think, was my last wrap-up. It's bad. I've read like 5 or 6 books since then. It's not good. But in my defense, 2020 has not been good, and depression is a totally valid reason for a books reading slump. And B, on a more positive note, when I have not been feeling slumpy, I've actually spent most of my reading time researching literary theory or literary analysis or literary criticism. I became really fascinated with this question of how does one analyze literature and what are the various schools of thought? Because this is something every English class expected me to kind of know when I wrote an essay, but none of them could actually explain. I first thought that I just had really bad English teachers, but it turns out actually nobody has really made a comprehensive study of all of these different schools of thought. They just sort of all stick to the one or two that they actually know and don't really know about the others. So I now want to make that comprehensive comprehensive list that, if not a deep understanding of each school, will at least like hit the high points, you know? And as I studied this more and went down the internet rabbit hole of research, I discovered this is a really, really, really big topic, and it's just eaten up all the time that I actually have focus and attention to give. But on that note, let's actually get to the books I did read. MFK by Neela Magruder. On the positive sides, this has beautiful artwork, fascinating world building, very reminiscent of Nazca of the Valley of the Winds, if you've seen that Studio Ghibli anime. I read this for the Ace Race readathon. It was the only book I got to in that readathon, mainly because it's mostly beautiful pictures and not words, because words are hard sometimes. Since this is only the first volume, I can't say if the plot is really going to take off or if the characters are going to do great. Seemed fine so far. Hard to tell from just the first volume, though. Because it was part of the Ace Race readathon, presumably some character in this is canonically on the Ace spectrum, but I did not see that yet in here. The main character, however, is hearing impaired and has a cochlear implant, and that was kind of refreshing to see a character have a disability that is not integral to the plot or theme of the story, but just a thing that they have to live with. That was MFK by Neela Magruder. Very nice. Was not captivated enough to go and get more books in this series, though. The Complete Priest's Handbook to 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. I read this because a religious order, a monastery, takes central role in my current work in progress, and I was looking for some inspiration on how religious orders work, what the daily life in such a thing might be. Sadly, this was not one of the better complete handbooks from 2nd edition. Some of them are really, really great inspiration for world building, but this was not. I found it pretty meh. Pretty so-so. There was no deep cut into monastic lifestyle that really jumped out and made me go, aha, that's how the world works in my book. It was pretty blah. Unfuck Yourself. Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life by Gary John Bishop. Okay, as the self-help books go, this is quite good at the two primary functions of a self-help book, which is reframing your life into a more useful perspective and cheering you on to be successful. And this does that pretty well, with much less cuss words than the title would get you to think. I personally did not get a lot of use out of this, but I did enjoy it. It gave me some inspiration feels for a few days of being better at life. And I could see how I would recommend this to certain people or in certain situations. Selected quotes. Oh, this author has a Scottish accent, and I found knowing that fact really improved the reading, and I'm now going to attempt to read these quotes in the Scottish accent. You have the life you're willing to put up with. Stop doing all that shite you know you shouldn't be doing, and start doing all the shite you know you should be doing. That was Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop. Soulless, the first book in the Parasol Protectorate series by Gail Carriger, an Alexa Terabati novel. I was actually kind of surprised how much I like this. I got it because I'm trying to get more into the steampunk genre to see what that's about and what the expectations and tropes and styles of such works are. Because as much as I like steampunk aesthetic, I'm not really I'm not hooked into the culture. You know, I'm not hip with what the kids want these days. Where was I? I'm surprised how much I like this. It is a romance novel. That is not a genre that particularly is ever called out to me. In fact, in most cases, it really annoys me. But this was fun. It leans very heavily into romance tropes and very heavily into the YA urban fantasy tropes. It basically is a YA urban fantasy in Victorian England with some steampunk aesthete. Did I even use the word aesthete correctly? I don't know. It is very tongue-in-cheek about leaning into all of these tropes of all of these different genres that it's pulling from. So let me break this down. The first several chapters, I was like, this is tongue-in-cheek, this is funny, I love it, but I get bored of comedy books usually about a third of the way in, and I thought that was going to happen with this, but then it kind of just like took off. It got good, actually. Around the time that I thought I was going to start getting bored, it added in like deep character development and a lot of the tropes that it was relying on. It then actually like explained why this person would actually behave this way. You know, for example, the main character, the book starts off with her going like, oh, I'm not like other girls. No man could ever find me attractive because I'm just so buxom and large-breasted with dark, perfectly complexioned skin. Yeah, it would have rung hollow if it wasn't so tongue-in-cheek. But then, like I said, about a third of the way in, you, like, realize, oh, like, no, her family is just shit and has been gaslighting her to hate herself her whole life. Wow, that got really, really serious. Huh. And there's a lot of other stuff like that. That's just one example. That was Soulless. Oh, I had some other thoughts. I'm looking over my notes from Goodreads and I don't see them here, but I know I had other thoughts. Oh, this isn't a spoiler. It's in like the first chapter, but the reason it's called Soulless is because it is believed that supernatural monsters in this world yeah, so in this, there's vampires, there's werewolves, and then there's ghosts that are never really mentioned because who cares? You just have to have a third one. And then there's the soulless, which are like super mundane. They negate supernatural powers. And she's one of these. And it's believed that the other supernaturals have an abundance of soul energy, and that's what makes them supernatural, and that she like doesn't. And you would think that there's like a lot of theological implications to not having a soul, but there aren't. Never really mentioned. It's kind of mentioned sometimes that she has like poor fashion sense because she doesn't have a lot of soul, and it seems like soul in this sense is more like in blues or jazz terms than spiritual. But she also kind of just seems to be her own opinion that she has bad fashion sense and nobody else really notices. I don't know. It's a really weighty concept to put as your title and not use. Just saying. Anyway, that's Soulless by Gail Carriger. I am finally getting into Brandon Sanderson. Guess as an epic fantasy reader and writer, I should be familiar with Brandon Sanderson, the current golden boy of epic fantasy, and never read any of his books, so I thought I should fix that, and I picked out Warbreaker, mainly because it's a standalone, and I won't get sucked into, like, the next 6 months of my life being dedicated to reading some series. Okay, what do I say about this? Pros. No, not the pros, but pro versus con. Good parts. All of the characters in this book are fascinatingly complex. Even the secondary characters have a lot of thought put into them. Nobody is two-dimensional. Also, the magic system is different from anything I have ever seen anywhere else. And it's quite fun and fascinating and ties in with the ambiance of the book quite well to make a very colorful and wonderful story in many ways. And there are no cons that I can think of to counterbalance that, so good job, Brandon. Side note, most books start with a hook, or somewhere in the first chapter, they say something really interesting that makes the reader want to know more. This book started with like 80 hooks. The first chapter I just had to put down and be like, pick one, dude. Spread it out. You got this weird magic system that is weird and new and interesting and full of questions. Then you add another layer to that magic system that gives a whole new series of questions, and another layer. There's like so many things happening, and then I'm like, who the heck is this character? Why is they doing all the what that is going on? There's political intrigue. There's a talking sword. I'm just like what? Pick a thing. Spread it out across the rest of the book, which I guess it's not like the rest of the book lacked for interesting things, so, but like, yay. It was an intense first chapter of question marks popping up over my head. Anyway, finally, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which I apparently did not update my Goodreads with. Okay, what can I even say about one of the giants of epic fantasy? For an epic fantasy reader and writer, I'm apparently very poorly read in the canon of epic fantasy, which I am trying to fix. Reading this amazed me how many other books I have read, I suddenly went, oh, this is where they got those ideas. This is where all these tropes started. This is where it came from. Oh, what to say? Amazing ability to describe the world. I listened to it in an audiobook, and I might have to actually reread this to study with my eyeballs how he actually uses description. But I don't want to do that because this thing is monstrously long. It took me like 3 months as an audiobook, reading it as I drive, to finish. Great characters. Hits all of those like epic fantasy, coolness feels that you expect from an epic fantasy. On the con side, there are some tropes that feel dated. The fact that he's fighting the ultimate evil of evilness bad guy feels dated. The fact that the magic system is gendered feels dated. Like, if this magic system existed in a book today, I would be expecting that rule to be suddenly broken by some non-binary characters popping up. And maybe that's just really high expectations on my part. But, like, the only reason I keep expecting it because I'm like, why would you make such a big deal about the difference between men and women in magic unless you were about to, like, break that expectation and be like, bitches, trans people are real. But yeah, all in all, amazing book. Series is probably a must-read if you're someone like me who is in epic fantasy. But gosh, these things are a beast to get through. They're just really, really monstrously long. Oh, and I have read Story Genius: How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Write a Riveting Novel by Lisa Cron. Before you waste 3 years writing 327 pages that go nowhere. Mood. Yeah, so this is all about how to outline a novel through a character-driven method that, in theory, should allow me to write novels quickly and in an effective manner. I'm still working through actually following the steps now. I'll have an update all about that someday. All right. Let's get into what I'm planning to read in 2021. Starting with... Okay. Now, books I'm going to read in 2021. Mostly undecided. I'm going to go with mood reading at this point, but the moods I'm trying to lean towards are steampunk, literary, which is kind of scattered all over, so I can't demonstratively just point at it, literary fantasy, and then a couple of specifics that I have set aside are The Archer by Paulo Coelho. I hope I pronounced that all correctly. I really enjoyed The Alchemist, and I'm hoping that this will also be an enjoyable read. The Last Unicorn, The Lost Journey by Peter S. Beagle, who, like everything he's written, is amazing, so I have high hopes for that. And The Dark Lord Bert by Chris Fox. Chris Fox is someone I mostly know through their YouTube personality and advice on writing, and I really love all of that, but I thought I should actually read his books to see if he writes as well as he advises. There's a lot of authors I only know as internet personalities and not through their actual books, and that makes me sad. So that's a thing I'm going to try to fix. And then finally, the book that I am going to try to get through for 2021. This is not going to be my main reading, but the 15 minutes each night sort of reading, because it is... This is, and I am going to try to pronounce this correctly. Bear with me. The Epic Tale of Hi'iaka Ika Poliopele, or Hi'iaka who is carried in the arms of Pele. This is a compilation of stories from the Hawaiian Islands that together make up the epic tale of how Hi'iaka goes and retrieves her oldest sister Pele's dream boyfriend and all of the adventures that she gets into along the way. And I am going to try and get through it within this year, not counting the first 56 pages that took me about 4 months to do so far. But hopefully I can pick up that pace. I have great expectations. Not literally the book Great Expectation, but I have hope. Okay. Anyway, YouTube, I'm Annie Johnson. This is the end of 2020. Thank whatever gods may be. Here's to a better 2021. By which I mean long-winded bullshit. I love you academics, I really do. I'm just poking fun, but also get your shit together. No one wants to read that. Please. I mean, I understand that's how you get success, but could you just write a Cliff's Notes that actually just contains the useful information to your essays after you've written the essay that you submit? It would really help. Anyway, I'm totally off on a digression. Book wrap-up 2020. Vampires and werewolves and ghosts. Okay, another digression. Why is it in the urban fantasy it's always 3 supernaturals? Like vampire, werewolf, and witches in Covenant of Witches, or it's vampire, werewolves, and angels, or demons, or there's always 3. And there's always 2 of them that you see a lot about in tons of world building. And then there's that third one that is thrown in there because you have to have the rule of 3, but they're never mentioned. No, okay, Covenant of Witches, it wasn't werewolves, it was vampires, which are basically have all the powers of Superman. They're peak super physical performance uber predators. Then there's witches who basically can do anything with their magic, and then there's demons, which are never mentioned. And you'd think they'd be really cool, but I looked up on the wiki, and they their entire superpower is that they tend to be better at art and more inspired. That's it. Anyway, that was a whole digression into a completely different novel. Moving on. Yeah, the whiskey's a bit more forward on this one than usual.